Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Harley Moyer, and I'm happy to introduce my fellow co-host, Mary Wessel.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Washington and Jefferson Fellows' third rendition of TomTalks.
I'm overjoyed to see so many people here in the audience, from current students, prospective students, alumni, and community members. And in addition, we're live streaming this out to the internet, so we probably have a couple billion more people watching. Now I'm sure the audience is wondering right now, Mary, what are TomTalks?
Well, Harley, the TomTalks are the Fellows' unique take on TED Talks. TED Talks are the revolutionary presentations delivered by artists, scientists, and thinkers from around the world.
Here at Washington and Jefferson, we have our own revolutionary thinkers. Carmen, Carroll, Prinkey, Emily Chambers, Kayla, Marasia, and Dr. Timothy Klitz. A core aspect of what makes TomTalks unique is a focus on intensive research and relevant topics combined in a way that makes it relatable to the average person.
Our speakers will be delivering talks on a variety of interesting topics, ranging from chronic illness to self-confidence.
That's cool, Mary. Now I'm sure the audience is wondering right now, who are the Fellows? What is the shadowy organization behind the scenes putting this event on?
The Fellows is an academic program designed by a revolutionary thinker herself, the first female president of Washington and Jefferson College, Dr. Tori Harry Smith. The Fellows is an evolution of the Collegiate Honors Program and focuses on additional networking, broadening our horizons, and challenging ourselves to provide an in-depth engagement in the liberal arts and sciences.
Each member's unique viewpoints and interests combine to add to the overall diversity of the program.
For example, Harley here likes pina coladas and getting caught in the rain.
Well, that may or may not be true, but I'm also a history and philosophy major here at Washington and Jefferson, and also a freshman in the Honors Fellows.
Like Harley, I'm a history and political science major and a sophomore in the Fellows program.
As you'll see, our four student speakers are similarly accomplished, and everything that they do adds in their own way to the Fellows dynamic.
So sit back, relax, and think about each topic. Think about how it affects you and develop your own revolutionary opinion.
And while you're listening to the speeches, feel free to formulate some questions. At the end of each speech, we're going to be passing around the microphone for questions. Also, if you're live streaming or shy, you can tweet using the hashtag WJTomTalk16, and we'll see your tweet and answer it. Also, at the end of the event, there's going to be a reception hour, with refreshments, I might add, in the back alcove.
Now let's transition to our speakers.
An interesting aspect of TomTalks is new perspectives and realizations of things you never even knew existed.
Using her personal story and scientific research, Prinkey illustrates how chronic illness can impact any individual.
Welcome, Katie.
Hello. Tonight I'm going to give a presentation on invisible chronic illness, specifically focusing on autoimmune diseases. And my goal is to just bring awareness and educate you guys on a topic you probably don't know much about and put it into a context that everyone can understand. So in order to do this, let's look at a specific disease. Wagner's granulomatosis with polyangiitis. It's a mouthful. So a few other facts. It's categorized as a rare, invisible, chronic autoimmune disease that's also a form of vasculitis. So what do all of those words mean? So let's break it down. Some definitions to help understand. A rare disease in the United States is categorized as any disease that affects 200,000 or less Americans at any given time. An invisible illness deals with an illness that has symptoms that will impair daily activities but aren't necessarily apparent to someone on the outside. And an autoimmune disease is when your immune system, which is in charge of taking care of foreign bodies, starts to attack healthy cells in your body. So a few statistics. In the United States, 96% of people with a chronic illness show no outward signs, but 10% of those people experience debilitating symptoms. So again, it's below the surface. We just don't know upon looking at them. Now, some more known autoimmune diseases that you may have heard of include lupus, Crohn's, or rheumatoid arthritis. There's many more, but these are some of the more common ones. You actually may have heard of lupus from a few celebrities who have it. Recently, Selena Gomez and Nick Cannon. So as you can see, it's easy to live a relatively normal life, even with this autoimmune disease. So let's look at the difference between a chronic disease and a terminal illness. A chronic disease is one that lasts 3 or more months, but is treatable, but it never disappears completely. Whereas a terminal illness, which usually includes cancer or heart disease, has a very intensive treatment and not always a positive outcome. And now let's look specifically at Wagner's GPA. So in specific for this disease, it's an uncommon disease that affects 1 in 30,000 people. The peak age range is between 40 and 60 years old. And it's also important to note that there's no known cause at this point for this disease. And that's common among most autoimmune diseases, including lupus. So this autoimmune disease at its core is a result of inflammation of blood vessels that attack different organ systems. The main systems that are affected include the sinuses, lungs, upper respiratory systems, and kidneys. And the symptoms for this autoimmune disease, as well as many other autoimmune diseases, are really vague in general and easy to write off. So they include joint pain, fever, fatigue, weight loss. So very easy symptoms that you wouldn't necessarily think add up to anything in particular. So one of the treatment options for autoimmune diseases is chemotherapy. Most people are probably sitting there thinking, that's only for cancer. Chemotherapy is not just for cancer. Chemo at its core is used to kill cells. In the case of autoimmune diseases, it's going to suppress the immune system, which is overworking itself and killing off healthy cells. So there are a few differences, though, between chemotherapy for cancer and chemotherapy for autoimmune diseases. For cancer, it's usually a higher dose of chemo coupled with radiation, whereas for autoimmune diseases, it's a low dose of chemo with no radiation, therefore there's mild side effects. So this is a really great chart to showcase, it's called the spoon theory, and it's a chart used by people with chronic illnesses to help illustrate how much energy they have per day. Typically, someone with a chronic illness is going to have between 12 and 17 spoons. Someone who is healthy and doesn't have a chronic illness usually has between 20 and 25. So I've used the example of 15, a nice normal middle-of-the-road option. And let's try to calculate how much energy we have for today. Most of you, I assume, got out of bed this morning, so that is 1 spoon. Some of you may have showered, so we're up to 3. I'm assuming you guys studied or went to class. So now we're up to 8 spoons, and we haven't worked out, we didn't do our homework, and we haven't eaten anything yet. So you can see that these add up really quickly. And once you run out of spoons, that's it. You have to rest, you have to recharge. You have no other option. So why am I telling you guys all of this information? It's a lot of information. Why share it? So let me put this into context for everyone. You probably would not have guessed by looking at me that even though I'm on the tennis team, I have scar tissue in my lungs and arthritis. Or that despite being involved on campus and having 2 jobs, I have chronic fatigue. Or that a year and a half ago, I couldn't even walk for more than 20 minutes. I have Wagner's ganglionosis with polyangiitis. So let me share with you guys a little bit about my story. I was diagnosed about 3 weeks before moving into college a year and a half ago. So I went to my ear, nose, and throat doctor, the ENT, with an issue of chronic sinus infections. He didn't seem very concerned. He gave me some antibiotics, ran a routine blood test, told me to come back. And when I came back, he said, I think this is what you have. And of course, I was completely unprepared for that kind of diagnosis. I had no idea what any of these terms meant. So he referred me to a specialist, a rheumatologist at the Cleveland Clinic. And from there, I was diagnosed on a Friday, went in to see the specialist on a Monday, and that whole week was just test after test after scan after scan. And it was found out that I was bleeding in my lungs, and then I had to go and get those cleaned out. And eventually it turned to, you're not going to play tennis this year at W&J. And then it turned into, I don't recommend going to school this year. which for me was the hardest part to deal with. I love education, I love going to school, I love all the activities involved with school. But in retrospect, I don't regret the decision to put off school year because I could not have been as involved as I would have liked to be. And I couldn't have played tennis. So by that Friday, 1 week after being told I had this disease, I was receiving my first chemotherapy treatment. And from there, my life changed. So what are some of the long-term outcomes for someone with a disease like this? So there's a lot of great new treatment and research options for people. And so a normal life is relatively easy to achieve. Specifically for my disease, though, a relapse occurs 50 to 70% of the time. So I have maintenance work to do. I have monthly blood work and frequent doctor's appointments just to measure certain markers because there's no definitive test for what I have. Also, just to showcase how far research and technology has come, in the 1970s, prior to effective treatment, 50% of all patients with this disease died within the first 5 months. So it's a very progressive disease. But if we want to look to now, when there is effective treatment, more than 80% of patients are alive 8 years later. And I know 8 years doesn't sound like a lot, but remember the average age is between 40 and 60. So I'm going to hope this 20% is 70 plus. So what can you do? Now that I've given you this information and shared my own personal story, here's some things you can do or keep in mind if you know someone who has an autoimmune disease or perhaps you yourself do. The first is just try to understand and believe what these people are saying. Don't tell them to get over it, to suck it up, or they'll feel better tomorrow. You know, this is a real thing they have to live with day to day. This is a personal pet peeve of mine. Do not ask, how are you feeling? As soon as I was diagnosed, it was the first change I noticed. Instead of people asking, how are you doing? It was, how are you feeling? And that's a question you would ask a sick person. So it made me feel like I was really sick. Another thing is just do some research on your own. I provided you with a little background knowledge. Now stick to reliable sources so you don't freak yourself out, but there's plenty of reliable sources out there to just gain some general knowledge on invisible chronic illnesses or autoimmune diseases in general. Again, don't pity the person. This person knows how to deal with it, they've come to terms with it, or they will on their own time. So just respect them and respect their illness and understand that every decision they make is affected by this illness, whether they want to or not. And you can help support really great organizations out there, such as the Vasculitis Foundation or the Lupus Foundation of America, both of which you can change to your Amazon charity of choice. And both of which are working to find not only causes, but cures to both diseases. So I've given you a lot of information, and I hope that you've learned something, and that you have gained some insight into the world of chronic illness.
Now, do we have any questions in the audience?
Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Harley Moyer, and
I'm curious to know if there are any possible ways to use chemotherapy to treat type 1 diabetes, as it's also a autoimmune illness.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that disease, so I'm not a medical expert. I did not know that was an autoimmune disease, but there's different options. Even for my disease, the chemotherapy is a relatively new option. There's a couple other drugs. I take rituximab, which is a form of chemotherapy, but there's also a couple others like methotrexate and things like that. So I'm not really familiar, so I don't feel comfortable answering. Yeah.
If the treatment for the autoimmune diseases is to suppress the immune system, to what extent does that leave you open to other more ordinary diseases?
Yeah, it does open the door to a lot of other issues. Hand sanitizer is my friend. I do take a maintenance dose of antibiotics, so I take antibiotics 3 days a week for the foreseeable future. So that just kind of wards off infection. Just being conscious of this person has the flu, maybe I shouldn't go visit them today.
Do you have any particular advice for other people who are dealing with like chronic pain conditions that medical professionals a lot of the times I know will not necessarily pay as much attention to symptoms instead of just like joint pain and fatigue. Do you have any advice for people like that?
Are you talking about like as far as getting a diagnosis? Okay, yeah, that wasn't the first thing I noticed. In retrospect, I was like, wow, I was exhausted. I was coming home from school and I wouldn't even make it to my bed. I would just pass out on the living room floor. So it is kind of a hard thing. For me, it wasn't so much joint pain. As far as just noticing the signs, I would just recommend asking for a full blood test panel. Because that's where a lot of the markers come into play. As far as autoimmune diseases, that's going to be an inflammatory marker. So the doctors will know what test to run as far as what to look for.
Do you know whether consuming a diet rich in probiotic nutrition, like by eating, for example, fermented foods, would that help ameliorate the damage to your immune function?
That is actually a common misconception. I'm glad you asked. I considered putting it in the PowerPoint. It's actually kind of a pet peeve of people with chronic illness that people suggest a diet change. Diet changes can make small strides that will make you feel better on a day-to-day basis, but that would happen to anybody. Changing my diet really wouldn't help that much. I do tend to eat healthier now because of the autoimmune disease and how the antibiotics affect some different systems. So diet is important, but it is not going to cause a cure or a major change. All right, thank you.
Racism is a hot topic in America.
You're not wrong, Marion. It's something ingrained deep in the roots of American history.
From Jim Crow to Rodney King, institutionalized racism and racial profiling are still present in today's society.
Using her own experiences and her original poetry, Carmen Carroll is adding another perspective to the issue.
To start off my presentation, I have a poem for you all. It's dedicated to my sister. So when she was younger, she used to always come home and ask me to brush her hair, really slick back into a ponytail because she wanted it to flow like the white girls in her classroom because she was the only black girl. And I never really understood that because she has really long, beautiful, curly hair. And so this poem is for her and for anyone else who feels like they need to fulfill a beauty standard. It's called Fears for My Sister. I hope you enjoy it. If the thickness of her melanin is the butt of all jokes, then why is it envied? Her hair is so beautiful and strong, history is its conditioner. The same conditioner that strengthened her hair weakened the perception of its value. I fear for my sister. Being comfortable in her skin isn't just a metaphor, it's a fantasy. It's an oppressive reality. How will she get there if when she turns on the TV, beauty doesn't look like her? I placed a crown on her head that she won't accept because being black is not royal. Being black is mocked. Being black is that target on your back the slave masters aimed at it with their whip and now the police eye it with their clip. I fear for my sister. Rest in peace to my sister, Sandra Bland. I say my sister because my sister could be you one day. Suicide? Maybe. Who would want to be a black woman in society? Murder? Probably. Who would want to fight the defense of a black dynasty? They want to steal our diamonds and bury us in the ground that they stole it from. Not just the ones that shine, but the ones that radiate and reflect sending the rays. I'm scared for my sister. Because I feel the world will steal her diamonds. Leave her stranded and not see her value. Take her for granted. I fear for my sister. Who will help heal her bleeding hands as if her great-grandmothers had not bled enough? Maybe she will be the last to bleed. I hope so, sister. Thank you. So although my project and presentation is about racism, the topic that no one wants to talk about because it has an angry past, but I feel like if we don't talk about it, then how can we fix it? So, just to give just a background about racism, I think if we think of it as a structure, something that is ingrained, as our host said, in America, then we don't have to think of it as an attitude, or we don't have to pin it on individuals like Donald Trump or the KKK. It's something that we have been living with since we've been in America, or since the start of America. And another thing is to kind of think of it as a binary. So for some people, if you think that you're a good person, there's no possible way that you could be racist or say racist comments. Or if you are a bad person, that there's a way that you could be racist because you're a bad person. That binary has to be squashed. That's not the thing. So as I go through my presentation, there's a few warnings that I want to say to all my people of European descent, aka white people. Now, if you're feeling a little frigid and you don't want to talk about the topic, or you feel like I'm stepping on some toes, you're probably experiencing white fragility. Now, if I start to mention words like white privilege or the oppression of black people or any minority, and you feel guilty that you have some sort of power in America, you're probably experiencing white guilt. Next, if you nudge your white friend and you say, I don't do that, I don't say racist comments, or it's totally cool, like we're millennials, you're probably committing white solidarity. Next, if you tap your black friend or your minority friend and you tell them, well, my grandparents are racist, my aunt's racist, but I'm cool, like we're cool, you're rushing to prove yourself. But it's okay, that's why I'm here, that's why we're talking about it, and we're going to get through it, it's fine. So what is racism? Some people like to think that it's a thing of the past, that we live in post-racial America, and that we even have a black president, Carmen, so what are you talking about? Like, we're past it. Not quite. So if we look at one situation, let's say our education system, it's still segregated, so let's break it down. You are buying a house, and you want to live in a good neighborhood, so the realtor says, well, this is a good neighborhood. And you say, well, why is it a good neighborhood? Well, the school is a really nice school. Well, why is it a good school? Well, a lot of money and a lot of resources go into it. Well, who's giving the money? What kind of people live in this neighborhood? White people live in this neighborhood. Now, well, where's the bad neighborhoods? Well, the ones with the not so good school districts. Well, why are they not good? They're not getting resources. They don't have that much money. Oh, those are the ghettos. Oh, those are where the black people live, where the minorities live. So you're basically describing new segregation. So there's still racism. Now, another point is, where's the disparity? Let's take another example. Our jail and prison system. I'm reading a book by Michelle Alexander, a civil rights advocate who wrote The New Jim Crow, and she said in her book, and it's proven, you can look it up, that there are more African Americans in our jails and prisons than there were slaves in 1850, a decade just before the Civil War. Now, is that because more black people commit crimes? No. Actually, not at all. All racial groups commit the same amount of crimes, and actually, in a study by Boston College, white people do more drugs and use more drugs than any other racial group. Now, are white people just better criminals? Not quite. Black people and minorities are racially profiled. So, but Carmen, America was built on meritocracy. You can work your way up through the system, and you're here. You're in college. You have the same opportunities. Again, not the case. There are still systems. When you think of racism, it's another form of oppression. And in order to have oppression, you must have power. Now, power is associated with the majority, and the majority is white people. Not because you guys are a lot in number, but because you have power based on your racial past. And that doesn't mean we have the same opportunities, because, like I said, it's a structure. It's how our society is built. So no, I'm not saying all white people are racist, but I say that you are supported and the system is rigged for you and rigged against minorities. So how can we help? Wake up. There are three main forms that I witnessed in my life that are racism. So the first is microaggression, and those are many insults to minorities that not a lot of people think are bad because they're not out of malice. So for example, a microaggression could be a white person just coming up to my hair and going like this, oh my gosh, how do you get it to curl like that? And I'm just like, please, I'm not a petting zoo. Please do not pet me. Like, that's a microaggression. Although it wasn't out of malice, it's still offensive and an insult. Another is individualism. So Carmen, we're all individuals. There's nothing holding me back. I work my way up and I work hard for what I have. We get that. We all work hard. But I like to use the example of Tony Soprano. He's fictional. It was a movie, The Sopranos. His wife and his daughter and his sons all have the house and they have the cars and they have the money. But it was due to his grandfather is the reason why they have all the money. He created all the crime. are benefiting from the system. Anything that denies the rights of minorities help the advancement of white people. So next is universalism. Carmen, we're all humans, there's nothing holding us back. Not quite. And just because we're all human doesn't mean each minority doesn't have their own struggle. So next is be aware. These things are happening, and if you catch them, say something. It happens every day. And last is catch the signs. It happens in our classrooms, it happens in the hallway. If you see it, don't be afraid. Don't be fragile. Just say it. It's okay. It doesn't make you a racist, it's because our system is racist. So to leave you with another poem that I wrote, it's called Black Privilege. And it's an experience that actually happened in my life, and I hope that you enjoy it. Hey, do you want to hear a joke? What do Black people and apples have in common? Think about it. Black privilege is arguing that just because we have an African-American president does not mean we live in post-racial America. Quite frankly, that's bullshit. You don't want to sound like the mad Black woman. Black privilege is yelling, hands up, don't shoot, Black Lives Matter. Pledging my allegiance to a country that doesn't even recognize there's no food in my pantry. Black privilege is that constant reminder that although we've shared each other's company, you still decide to cross to the other side of the street to avoid me. So did you think about it? What do Black people and apples have in common? Black privilege is hearing that joke in the 6th grade, my heart filled with hate because he told me that Black people and apples both hang from trees. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Carmen?
So going back to your talking about like the education system and how the schools are really uneven because of like the neighborhoods that they're in, and the white people are like giving all the money to the schools, and the resources are available to the like schools that the Black kids go to. Like, do you have any like ideas on how to kind of like even out the resources being spread to like the schools, or to get more resources into the Black community?
Yeah, so I have, actually it's happening in DC right now. They're making affordable living in places of, I guess, better communities. So instead of making a place $1 million to live in a 1-bedroom studio, it's open to affordable living, so it's not as outrageous. So if you have the integration of incomes and affordable housing, it won't be as segregated.
Are there any organizations that you're involved in or that you know of that can help sort of combat these issues?
Just doing the simple thing as going to the Black Student Union is a big help. There was actually an event last semester, or this semester, February, we had a poetry slam which kind of touched these issues that I'm talking about now. Just attending them and just being supportive in your classrooms and in the hallways and even in your dorms. Just simple things like that. You don't have to march the hallways, it's not something that has to be done, but just being able to talk through the problems.
Are there things that you wish you could change about WJ in regards to racial issues?
I wish that there were more, for me, because I am African American, I wish that there were more African American classes. Currently, I take African American poetry, which is amazing, and I also take race and rhetoric. I really think that there should be more options on campus for that, because I'm learning so much about my history that I haven't learned because I learned history through a white lens instead of through a all-racial lens. So that would be great to have more classes.
We have a Twitter question by Kenny Clark. Miss Carroll, as college students, how can we avoid perpetuating these cultural norms on our campus?
So by cultural norms, I guess he means not being in a fulfillment of a beauty standard. Okay, we're just gonna go with that. So another way to avoid perpetuating cultural norms is, for me, it was hard because I always felt the need to, as my sister, wear my hair pulled back and be kind of fit to the cultural norm, not be the angry Black girl that always talks about race and always pulls the race card. I think another way is using things like BSU, Black Student Union, and TomTalks to talk about them. Avoiding cultural norms is going to be hard because it's been something that's ingrained in our community and in our society. It's just something that happens, but I think just embracing who you are, learning about who your culture is a really way to avoid the cultural norms.
Obviously, diversity is an important issue, and it's something that WJ doesn't really touch on, the importance of it. So you think that one solution would be to have more than one requirement for diversity? Do you think that would be a good solution?
Most definitely. I think more than one requirement to graduate is just one diversity course. I think it should be more than one. I don't know how many, but I think it should be more than one. And it should be incorporated. There's a lot of things that intersect, like a writing could be, it could be a writing of humanities and a diversity. I think if we had more just diverse classes, that would kind of help too.
Thank you. Now, many people hate reading. I remember in high school and even now in college, people dreading every time a book was assigned. You could practically feel it in the air. Now, usually, I like reading, but I remember junior year, Pride and Prejudice. About halfway through, or really more about 100 pages in, I switched to Spark Notes. I know there's some people in here who can relate. I just didn't understand how forcing my way through that book could help me in life.
With her dual passions in English and education, Kayla Marasia has an interesting cross-disciplinary topic on literature's effect on society, both mentally and socially.
Hello. I'd like to begin by reading a passage from one of my favorite novels called The Great Gatsby. To give you a little bit of context, Gatsby takes place in the 1920s, the roaring 20s of America, which was a time of economic prosperity, some good jazz music, and a lot of materialism. So Gatsby is in love with a woman named Daisy. All of her flaws, because she's really materialistic, and it's arguable that she doesn't love him as deeply as he loves her. But he idolizes her. And this book is kind of about the pursuit of the American dream. So I'm going to read you the last page of this, but I'm not going to give away the spoilers. And as I sat there brooding on the old unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgiastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning. So we beat on, both against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. So I just wanted to show you guys that literature can transport you to different times, different places, and different ideas. So the first question I want to ask you is, what is literature? So the dictionary definition is literature, written works, especially those considered of superior or lasting artistic merit. But I'm sure a lot of you guys might be thinking, literature, something that is old, tedious, and a waste of time. And I can't really blame you for thinking that, because oftentimes classic literature is pretty old. It spans across the centuries of our history. It can be a little tedious sometimes, because often the older the work is, the harder it is to understand the wording. But I will argue that it's not a waste of time. So literature can act in different ways in our society. I believe that it can reflect and advocate for social change. George Orwell's 1984 is a dystopian novel. It was published in 1949, and it's about the year 1984. Now, Orwell meant it to be a satirical piece of an all-powerful government. The government has this omnipresent, omniscient force called Big Brother, who watches all of its citizens through TV screens and cameras and spies throughout the society. And also, the government creates this new form of speech called newspeak, where it basically eliminates all the unnecessary words of language, so that the citizens of this government do not even have the means to form rebellious thoughts against the government. So Orwell did not mean for this to be an instruction manual, but more of a warning, because he wanted to show what could happen to our society if people seek power too much. Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird was published in 1960, just on the brink of the civil rights movement. And it tells the story of an innocent black man who was convicted of a crime that he did not commit. And what's interesting about this novel is that it is told from the point of view of an innocent child. And she doesn't understand the prejudices that plague her society. She doesn't discriminate against anyone. even though everyone else does around her. So this novel just shows that we come into this world innocent, and if we allow society's views of hatred to plague us, to paint our ideas, then that's a dangerous thing. And I just want to draw attention to Jane Austen. She was a writer during the Regency period when social spheres mostly focused on men. So women were mostly expected to be dainty and delicate and ladylike. What's interesting about Jane Austen is that she often wrote satirical works about the class divide. So she often poked fun at like the upper class, and it's funny because the upper class often liked her novels anyway. But one of her most famous novels is Pride and Prejudice, one that Harley did not like very much, but I will argue that it does have some merits. The main character, Elizabeth Bennet, is a really independent, strong-minded young woman. And there's this one iconic scene that I always remember. She trudges through these muddy, rainy fields to visit her sister at the Bigley Manor, where she's sick. And she doesn't even care that her dress is getting all muddy. So when she arrives, her dress is covered in 6 inches of mud, and she's viewed as unladylike because she didn't care about her clothes. But Elizabeth doesn't even care. She just wants to see her sister. So I just think that's a really important moment because she wasn't restricted by the confines of her society. She did it in spite of it. So she didn't care about her dress. I think a little while's good for us. Literature can also mark social progress and the evolution of our ideas throughout history. So the epic poem Beowulf was written in the Dark Ages, and it kind of marks the transition between paganism and Christianity in England. So the Anglo-Saxons came over, and they were pagans, and they were barbarians, and whenever they were converted to Christianity, there was sort of a clash of ideas, and Beowulf sort of highlights that, because Beowulf was originally an oral tale that people told and didn't really write down. So the man who eventually, or the person who eventually wrote it down, was a Christian. So he took this pagan story and made it into a Christian one, where the main character Beowulf was still a pagan, but he had these Christian values. So this kind of shows the transition between those two ideas. Now there is a movie version where one of the most menacing monsters of the poem is portrayed by a gold-covered Angelina Jolie. Now that doesn't actually happen in the poem, so I'm sorry if that deters you, but I would still recommend the poem anyway. Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities is one of my favorite works. It tells the story of the French Revolution, but it's not how you would read it in a textbook. It's not just cold, hard facts about the revolution itself. It actually tells the story of how the revolution began from the people's point of view. So you see the suffering and the oppression that occurred under this corrupt government, and how much the people actually experienced this pain. And even with like poignant images such as wine barrels being spilled on the street as a symbol for the blood that was to be spilled in the rebellion, through images like these and the ideas that we can learn from the characters in the story, we can learn a little bit more about what sparked the revolution itself. So literature can also affect our ways of thinking in our daily lives. It can induce open-minded thinking and understanding new perspectives, because whenever we read, we are influenced by these ideas, and we learn that other people have different points of view, and we have to be open-minded to those. Literature is also conducive to our problem-solving skills. Whenever we are presented with a conflict in a story, we often try to subconsciously figure out a way to solve it. Now, sometimes the protagonist doesn't always solve it the way you would, but it does show you that there are different solutions to different problems, and they have different outcomes. Literature can also help with our creativity, because the constant influx of new ideas that we get whenever we read can help us to create our own. So one of the most important points, I think, is that literature can help us with our sense of empathy towards other people. So studies have shown that frequent readers of fiction have a strengthened theory of mind. Now that's a psychological concept. It's the ability to interpret one's own and other people's emotions and mental states, and understanding that other people have different perspectives. So this is important because we need to understand that other people are coming from different places with different ideas, and that those are just as valid as our own. Just because someone has a different idea from you doesn't mean that it's any worse or any better. We need to understand that people have different motivations. So that can help with our sense of empathy in our daily lives. Now, continuing off of that, literature can actually have a physiological effect on our brains. So the brain's temporal lobe is that green area right there, and that deals with the processing of language, and it's also the sensory motor region, among other things. So those studies showed that whenever people that read a lot had increased connectivity in their brains. So do you see all those red dots there? Those are the increased connections that happened whenever people read frequently. So that just shows, it suggests actually that whenever we place ourselves in a story, we immerse ourselves in it, we place ourselves in the shoes of the protagonist almost. So if we immerse ourselves in a battle scene, we can kind of feel that adrenaline. And those areas of the brain were stimulated where they wouldn't have been otherwise if we had, or as much, if we hadn't have read that much. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are asking the question, what if I'm not a bookworm or an English major? Now, the answer to that is literature has many benefits that can help you even if you don't have an extremely interesting books. I think that reading can help us in all aspects of our lives. So it's simple. Pick up a book and read a few pages a day. It can help settle your mind at night from all the stresses of life. I know we're all busy. A lot of us are in college or have jobs, but I feel like it's important to immerse yourself in these ideas. So I just have a few recommendations for you. These are from, most of these I have in my personal library, so if you can borrow any, so, just a few. Thank you very much.
I think you're going to be a great teacher one day, Kayla. Are there any questions?
I know this may be hard for you because you read a lot, but I feel like everybody has their favorite book of all time or a book that really changed them. One of mine is Randy Pausch's The Last Lecture. And one of the chapters of the book is, are you going to be a taker or an eater today? And that's one thing that I would think of every morning. So do you have a favorite book that has taught you something, or just a favorite book in general?
That is a really good question. And I've been trying to think about this because I thought someone might ask. But I just have so many favorites. I probably have like a top 20. But I think most recently, in the fall, I read The Catcher in the Rye for the first time. And I loved like the feelings of angst and alienation because I think a lot of us sympathize with that at some point in our lives. And I just really loved like the character of Holden Caulfield. I feel like it's pretty relatable. So I read that in the fall for the first time and I really loved that. So that's probably up there. Maybe it's not my absolute favorite, but it's a good question. It's hard to answer though.
What do you think about when books are translated into films? Do you think that like it holds the same value in it, or do you prefer reading versus watching the film?
That's a good question. I definitely think that, I don't want to say the books are always better than the films. I think both books and movies hold value, but they're just different kinds of value. So I love the Harry Potter books, I love the Harry Potter movies, but they're different experiences, I think. So a lot of times whenever you convert a book into a movie, you lose a lot of the deep meaning that you can find in a book just by experiencing like the pages and the words themselves. Now some movie conversions are better than others, but like I said, I think they're both valuable just in different ways.
Do you think that the brain being stimulated, the way you were talking about with reading, do you think that can happen with other sort of narrative, what's the word I'm looking for, media outlets? Like if there's something else with an equally strong story as a novel, do you think it would do relatively the same thing?
So you mean like not actually a written work?
Correct.
Okay, I think probably, like maybe for movies you can get a certain, you can probably get the same connections from being immersed in the story, but I feel that reading requires activity on your part. You actually have to put yourself in the pages and put yourself in the story. Whereas with a movie, you can kind of be passive and watch it. So I feel like that active part that you play, what was that?
The interactive?
Yeah, the interactive part that you play can benefit your brain a little bit more than maybe just sitting passively.
I've had a lot of professors, and I'm sure everyone here has, that say that there's a difference between literature and just like a plain old novel. And I was wondering, where do you draw the line, if you do, between literature and a novel? Like what makes something, what would you consider to be literature?
That's a good question. I hesitate to draw a line at all because I feel Like, if you're going to read, then I'm happy about that. I think some books are better than others. But I feel like as long as you're immersing yourself in the story and you're learning something from it, then I advocate for that. The Hunger Games, I don't know if any of it could be considered literature. I hesitate to draw on it, I feel like that's a really good story anyway. So I feel like if you're going to read, that's a good thing. Then you can draw the same benefits.
Do you remember on a particular occasion reading whether it's a short story, a particular line of prose or poetry, anything like that? Is there any instances that stand out as like things that just sort of made you, that like stunned you, that really opened up your mind in new ways, that evoked such a strong response that you had to put down what you were reading, just sort of remarkable at what the author said or did?
Wow, that is a really good question, one that's hard to answer. I have to say, for most of the works that I read, I do find a line like that I almost want to get tattooed somewhere. I mean, I feel like that happens in a lot of the novels I read. I mean, I hate to use Gatsby again, but the prose is so beautiful in this book that a lot of those lines I really just love. So I feel like the authors put those words in there for a reason to inspire that moment of revelation. And so that can happen in any situation. I think it depends on the person. Me personally, I would say Gatsby is the closest example I can think of.
How do you feel about the banned book movement?
What was that?
How do you feel about the banned book movement?
Okay, well, I think, you mean as far as like censorship of different novels? Because the idea is, I don't agree with it because I feel like The Catcher in the Rye was censored at some point. Lots of great books have been censored because of their content, but I feel like even like that censored content can invoke different ideas in us. And I don't really believe in that kind of censorship because I feel like we should all be free thinkers and we can filter that content as necessary within ourselves. So I think we should be able to think about whatever we want as far as literature.
So for years, like the stuff that was considered literature and good to read was pretty much from a single perspective, correct?
Where are you?
Right here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have you noticed any changes now in how what's considered good to read, what's literature, how that's broadened?
Can you repeat that? I need to absorb it.
Have you noticed anything, how the scope of what good literature is, how that's broadened?
Okay, well, like I said before, I feel like good literature is within the eye of the beholder, I guess. I feel like a good book may be good to someone and maybe not another. So I would say it's hard to like define a classic in modern days, just because how can you tell it's a classic? Usually classics are defined on how they stand the test of time. But I'm not sure that the category has broadened exactly, but I just think that it's within each person's perspective.
Thank you, Kayla.
So, Marlon, did that give you a better appreciation of Pride and Prejudice?
Well, I certainly appreciate literature more, but I'd much prefer to reread 1984 or The Divine Comedy than ever touch Pride and Prejudice.
Hey, Carly, have you been lifting?
Yeah, I have. It's the only way for me to feel self-worth and to feel liked by others.
Sounds like you can use a talk from Emily Chambers. Every day, people struggle with the ideology of acceptance.
Hello, I'm going to give a talk today about self-confidence. Now, schools are great at teaching you things. They teach you things like 2 plus 2, that equals 4. George Washington, he was the first president. And no, do not eat the paste. But unfortunately, they aren't so good about teaching about self-confidence. In fact, they tend to be a breeding ground of low self-confidence. Now, I know this from experience because someone very close to me had a problem with self-confidence. She was my sister. And growing up, she didn't know who she was. So she looked to other people, she looked to her friends, what they were doing. Maybe she could do that too. If they started drawing, she started drawing. Unfortunately, she couldn't draw as well as them, and so she got discouraged again. And I saw how that affected her. And I thought to myself, my wee, small self, no, that's not going to happen to me. I am going to be confident. I'm going to be like, yes, I am great. I don't care what you have to say. I like me. So it stuck. And I got to be one of the lucky ones. Now, use this word self-confidence, and you're probably wondering, what does that mean? Well, if you Google search it, you'll get pictures of people throwing their hands in the air and jumping in front of sunsets for Instagram pictures. But that's not really a definition, now is it? So what is it? It's a trust in one's own abilities, judgments, and qualities. And it can be either positive or negative, and it all depends on the person's thoughts. So like I said, it depends on your thoughts, but you get your thoughts from other places. You know, you don't come up with everything all on your own. Your parents are a key factor. You ever come home from kindergarten with that figure painting, like all the other kids, but they're like, this is the greatest thing in the world, and it goes right up on the fridge. Did you feel great? I know I did. Your peers. You know, oh, I see that you're wearing those shoes today. Why, yes, I am. I need to cover my feet. Your friends, they're like, oh my gosh, I just got this new jacket. You look so cute in it. And you try it on, you're like, you're darn right I look cute in it. Yeah, building that self-confidence. And there's society. You have to look like this. But what if I can't? Well, too bad. That's not good. That brings you down. Makes you think of different thoughts. And there's yourself. You can't escape you. You're always there, all the time, 24/7. You try and go to sleep, what's the first thing that happens? You're thinking about your entire day. You're always there, watching. Then there's the environment. You go to the mall, window shopping, you see those mannequins. Do you walk like this? I don't walk like this. But they think that I should walk like this. Low self-confidence. There's a lot of situations where it can happen. Comparing yourself to others. Don't do that. You're you. You shouldn't compare yourself to someone else. That'd be like comparing my doggy paddle to Michael Phelps freestyle. First of all, I am not a man. Second of all, I can't swim very well. That just doesn't make sense. Thinking negative thoughts about yourself. None of that. Be positive. Think, yeah, I can do this today. It's going to happen. I don't know what it is, but it's going to happen. Not feeling comfortable in your own skin. I have a question for you. If you don't feel comfortable in your own skin, whose skin are you going to feel comfortable in, and how did you get it? That can't be legal. I'm telling you. Oh my gosh, stop that. Taking a test. All right, you walk in there. I have crammed for 24 hours for this test. I know my stuff. You sit down, you look at the first page, you don't know anything. First 5 questions, and you're like, this is a great start. No, you need to sit down that test and be like, I've been studying. I know 95% of the knowledge, and I am going to ace this test. Believe in yourself. You put enough time into it. Meeting new people, that can be terrifying. Your friend comes up like, hey, this is my friend Susie. And you're like, I need to impress Susie because she's my friend's friend. We can do this. I believe in myself. I look cute today. Hi, Susie. You gotta believe in yourself. And who gets affected by low self-confidence? Everybody. Everybody does. You always hear about the girls, right? That's always in the media. You need to look this way. You need to look like a model. And then there's the other side of it. You go ahead, you look like you, it's perfectly fine, but it's always centered on the females. A great example or role model. Like, oh, you should look like this. I will never in my life look like that. Do you know why? I have red hair and she has brown, and I'm not willing to dye it. Men, the lesser known side of it. All right, they're supposed to look like all these macho men, yeah, lifting, but only arms, no legs. And they're supposed to look like Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman doesn't look like that 95% of the time. I bet he munches on cupcakes when he's not doing movies. Okay? Stop trying to look like someone else whenever you yourself look beautiful. You are wonderful just the way you are. And another scary part that can cause low self-confidence is transitions, going from high school to college. Yeah, I was valedictorian, I got all the high grades, I was that smarty pants in my class. And then you go to college and you're like, whoa, look at all these other really smart people. What's up with that? And then you think, I don't need to study for that. I was smart in high school. I didn't have to study then. And you get your first test back and you're like, a C? Never got one of those before. That's kind of scary. An important thing to do here is to stop and breathe. You're like, okay, this is one grade out of many, lots and lots of other grades to bring that up. But you need to not be so hard on yourself. It's a scary time. You're going from small town high school, or big high school for some of you people, and it's in a totally different environment. What you learned in a year, congratulations, you've got like 3 months, and then you have a final. Low self-confidence can really affect you sometimes. Some of these side effects are hypervigilance. And when I say that, I don't mean like paranoia, like, oh, Big Brother's watching me, oh, gotta watch out. No, not like that. What it is you don't know who you are, so you look at other people, and you try to become them, which is like cloning, but not fun. And hypersensitivity, not a spidey sense either. It's, oh, I don't feel good about myself, so if you say something to me that makes me sad, I'm going to bawl, and I'm going to feel worse. That's never a fun time. So there's an easy way that you don't have to deal with these side effects. Be self-confident. Whether you think you can or you think that you can't, you're right. I wish tests were like this. 100% right anytime. No matter what you pick, you are right. That's a grant. Please sign me up for that. But to bring home to the point, positive and negative, really important. All right, if you think that you can, you can. You got this. You got a little pep in your step. You got a little, I can do this. And if you think you can't, it's always in the back of your head. It's like a little bug, like a gnat. You ever have them by your ear? Yeah, they're annoying, aren't they? So get rid of the annoying. And just think, yeah, I got this. Some other easy ways to build your self-confidence. Know your strengths and weaknesses. Again, do not compare yourself to Michael Phelps. Not gonna work. He has Olympic medals, and I do not. But I won't feel bad about myself for that. Don't go saying and looking at other people and comparing yourself. You're you, and that's all that matters, because you are the best at being you. How about that? You should get a medal for that. Walk with purpose. It may sound funny, changing the way that you walk, but if you have your shoulders back and you have your head up and you walk like you know where you're doing and what you're doing, fabulous. It makes such a difference. Plus, you don't run into poles. Going like this, it's like, oh, bam. It's a great way to meet new people, but maybe not on the right foot. Acknowledge that everyone makes mistakes. Hannah Montana tells you this. Nobody's perfect. Okay? You make mistakes. Let it go. It happens. You're human. Unless some of you are aliens, in which case, welcome. Alright? They happen. Forgive yourself. Accept compliments and compliment yourself. If I walk up to you and I'm like, I like your shirt, it's because I like your shirt. Don't be like, oh, my friend has a cooler shirt. I'm not complimenting them. I'm complimenting you. I'm like, I like your shirt. You should be like, thank you, I know. Build yourself up. Believe in yourself and your ability to get dressed in the morning. Okay? And this, oh, so important. Try and just stay generally positive. Like, I know it sounds like something little, but it makes such a difference. Anytime you get that little gnat buzzing in your ear, like, oh no, you can't do this, swat it. Like, don't hit yourself, but like mentally just swat it. Be like, no, I can do this. I am great. I have studied. I got dressed this morning. I have pants on. I can do this. And just keep doing that. Every time a little negative thought happens, smash it away. Think of a positive one, maybe even 2. Okay, just outdo the negative. My sister did this, and she's doing a lot better than me. She's a lot more confident with herself. and she likes herself. And that is so important. All right, and in the words of Demi Lovato, what's wrong with being confident? Nothing. Thank you.
All right, do we have any questions?
What about overconfidence?
There's a fine line. I like to think of being confident as also being humble. Like you are sure of your abilities, but you keep it to yourself unless somebody asks. Don't go bragging like, oh yeah, I can doggy paddle the best out of anybody. Just keep it to yourself until it's asked.
What would you say to those that are like very sensitive? I know you mentioned hypersensitivity. And there are some people who are very sensitive, and by surprise, there are some people who are afraid to be confident. They're scared that they might get cocky or become arrogant through confidence. Well, what's your thoughts about that? What would you say to them?
Well, I know some days I get a little too confident, and I never have to worry because I have my friends around me to knock me right back down. They're like, stop, really, just stop. So that's a really important aspect of it, is whenever you're trying to build self-confidence, you can't really do it by yourself. You need to have your friends, your family, everybody working on it together so that it's a support system, so that you can build yourself up until you're like, I can do this on my own. But whenever you finally reach that point, still keep them around you because they'll be the ones to tell you, hey, stop, you're overdoing it.
What's a personal struggle that you had from your transition from high school to college, as far as your self-confidence?
It was literally the example that I used. I was not valedictorian in my class, though. But I did pretty well. I was like, yeah, I get good grades. I get straight A's. This college breeze. And then I get here and I'm like, oh, maybe not. And it took a couple weeks and a lot of deep self-searching to finally realize it's okay. It's a new, scary environment, and you don't know anybody. Like, no one. And you're just trying to find your way. And it's okay to make little bumps and tripping and falling. That's why the professors are here to build you up. You know, you can always talk to your professor freaking out. Oh my gosh, I got a C. And they're like, why are you even talking to me? There's like 10 more assignments left. Don't worry about it. You're going to do fine. So that was the biggest thing for me. And just the professors and even the students here have helped so much because there's a kind of solidarity whenever everyone thinks they're really smart and then they find out that, oh, maybe I need to work a little harder.
Thank you.
Carly, you're glowing.
How can I not be with my newly found self-confidence? I'm comfortable with who I am, and I don't have to change myself to be happy. Thanks to Emily.
To symbolize the unity between our professors and students here at Washington and Jefferson College, we always select a professor as a guest speaker at TomTalks.
This is a good time to interject. Each year, the
Carly, you're glowing.
How can I not be with my newly found self-confidence? I'm comfortable with who I am, and I don't have to change myself to be happy. Thanks to Emily.
To symbolize the unity between our professors and students here at Washington and Jefferson College, we always select a professor as a guest speaker at TomTalks.
This is a good time to interject. Each year, the staff and faculty here at Washington and Jefferson help immensely in putting on TomTalks. From breeding intellectual thought to encouraging research, they help create a student's passion for learning, both in TomTalks and in the campus at large.
One of the members of this active faculty is Dr. Klitz, a professor of psychology. His humor, intelligence, and commitment to the students are reasons why he is such an effective professor.
Here to show his expertise, Dr. Klitz is here to add the realm of politics to psychology, showing how media and memory affect the way we vote.
Hi, good evening, everybody. 14 minutes long, so the end is near. All right, we're going to talk about elections and media and memory. Let me tell you a little bit how I got interested in this particular topic. The first election that I remember was 1980, a few years ago, when I was in 6th grade, and we did a project. We were supposed to pick who was going to win each state that year in the election. And I have very fond memories of starting to listen and think about elections at that time. And as I progressed through my years of education, I got interested in psychology and memory, and all these pieces sort of came together as a little pet side interest of mine, and that's where the presentation tonight comes from. I want to give a disclaimer to start with first, since I'm talking about politics. So my official political party affiliation is none. I am unaffiliated, so I am equally likely to pick on any of your favorite candidates in the election this time around. And I think that's important because I do talk about a number of the candidates in my presentation. So here they all are. On the left is the media, or at least some of them. On the right are the candidates. Love them or hate them, there they all are. And in the middle is the brain. So we're going to talk a little bit about memory during the presentation. So the WJ College mission statement talks about the idea that you will be effective lifelong learners and responsible citizens. The part I want to focus on this evening is being a responsible citizen and how to accomplish that goal. From my perspective as a psychologist, that means critical thinking. And I'm going to emphasize that idea throughout the talk, places where I think that critical thinking is a really important part of what you need to do. So I'm going to start with something that my first year seminar classes hopefully will find familiar, and maybe some of your FYS classes as well. I talk a little bit about Walker Percy, and this is one of the quotes that I use on a writing assignment in my classes. And it talks about the idea that sovereignty is being surrendered to a class of privileged knowers, and that the consumer is content to receive and experience just as it has been written about. And I added a few little extra words into the quote there to sort of emphasize what I'm getting at tonight. One of the things that we can be as a consumer of information is a passive consumer. And as we'll go through the presentation tonight, being passive is not something we want you to be as a graduate of Washington and Jefferson College. We want you to be active, we want you to be thinking, we want you to analyze what is being presented to you. And you'll see that as we go through. So I'm going to take two principles from my area of interest, which is cognitive psychology, and those are the availability heuristic and false memory. So I've spotted a few former psych students in the crowd. Those topics will sound familiar because I talk about them in my classes as well. The availability heuristic is the idea that information can influence our decision making. And one of the things that often influences our decision making are the things that are most available to us. The thing that is sitting right in the front of our memory and having an influence on the way we make decisions. The media is clearly one of those things that is right in front of us and that has an influence on our thinking. So that information the media presents to you is available, and it's easily available to you. So it certainly falls into this category. My claim would be that this has the potential to lead to passive consumerism. That you take in what you are given by the media and take everything that you are given by the media and make an assumption that it is true and correct and accurate. And I would argue that that potentially leads to a distortion of reality. Depending particularly, if you take a subset of media organizations that have a leaning toward a particular political side. And I just picked a couple of examples up there that, at least in my opinion, have that particular kind of leaning. So, here are just a few examples of places where the availability heuristic plays a role. One of those places is in headlines. The big thing that you see when you pick up a newspaper or open a web page. That is very available information to you. You may not read any of the story to see what the story says to you, but the headline says a lot, and that becomes the thing that's sitting in your memory. So just a couple of examples. Chris Matthews exposes Donald Trump as a total fraud. You may or may not love Donald Trump, but it is unlikely that he is a complete and total fraud, as the headline dictates in this particular place. And hypocrisy by name is Hillary Clinton. You get it from both sides when you look at these kinds of headlines. But I would also argue that it is more than headlines that plays a role in making information available. It It is also the pictures that you are provided from the media as well. So you can take any one of these pictures that I put up there, and the media presenting that picture has a point that they're trying to make. So one of the things that the Republicans would like to do is make Hillary Clinton appear old and outdated. It is really easy to do to go find the worst possible picture of Hillary Clinton and put it in the article to emphasize the point that you are making. Donald Trump is a very angry person. This picture would go well with an article making that particular point. The picture is available information. Again, if you're just scanning a web page or scanning a newspaper, this may be all that you see, and it may be enough to make a point of what is available. So a really simple diagram to summarize this. The media has the potential to make information available to you that has a potential impact on the decisions that you make. This makes a big assumption, and that is that we are passive consumers. We fall into this trap more if we are passive. So the information being easily available makes us potentially not a critical thinker. We want to be the opposite of that. We want to be a responsible citizen. We want to be a person that seeks out and assesses the information, and that is the flip side of what a passive consumer is. Okay, so that's the end of part one on the availability heuristic. Here's example number two. We'll talk about false memory. A false memory is a memory of something that is often inaccurate or it is non-existent. The fact that false memories exist are a part of how our memory system works. We unfortunately do not store, and we cannot store, everything that we experience. It would be completely inefficient to accomplish that particular goal. As a result, we store pieces. And when we store those pieces and try to recall that information, we have to fill in those gaps later on. And the problem with this, of course, is that reconstruction is impacted by other factors. And of course, I think you can see where this is going, is that the other factor that I'm talking about here is the media. Available information that can help fill in those gaps is not always the correct information to fill in those gaps to make an accurate memory. So, memory is an efficient process because of the way that we store information. However, any cognitive process that is efficient is also error-prone, and we make mistakes as a result of that efficiency. False memories are not always intentional. So, we, however, sometimes like to assess blame in situations when someone makes a memory error. I think that is a natural way that we treat people. And we turn a false memory into an intentional lie. Those are two very different things. An assessment of intentionality requires critical thinking. We have to be willing to accept the fact that someone who has told a mistruth may not have done it intentionally, and it is just because of the way that memory works. So let's look at an example here. I'm going to pick on Hillary Clinton. Believe me, we could go pick on any of the 5 candidates and find examples of this, but this has been an example that I have used since 2008, because I think it really reflects well this idea of a false memory. So this is a YouTube video, and the title down there, Clinton Embellishes the Past, is the title that's attached to that YouTube video. And here's the CBS News text that goes with that video. Hillary Clinton greatly misstated an experience in Bosnia that has opened the door for her foreign policy experience to be scrutinized. This was at a critical moment in 2008 when she and Barack Obama were locked in a battle, just like we are seeing today in the Democratic Party 8 years later, where the decision was not clear yet who was going to be the nominee for the Democratic Party. So let's see what happens. In this story, Senator Clinton talks about her trip to Bosnia, and here's how she describes it. I remember landing under sniper fire. There was supposed to be some kind of greeting ceremony at the airport, but instead we just ran with our heads down to get into the vehicles to get to our base. That is what happened. And the imagination starts to flow, and you think the scene that it's a battle-torn scene at this airport. She's running to this car for her life to try to save herself. CBS News says, nope, this is not what happened at all. In reality, we had no known incidents of enemy fire. The mood on landing at the airport was light. Clinton was, children were there on the tarmac to greet the First Lady. Chelsea was by her side. Bosnian dignitaries had gathered and felt safe. There they all are in the picture. The children, Chelsea, and the dignitary, all having handshakes and handing off gifts on the tarmac of this airport. There was no enemy fire, there was no danger in that particular setting. So how do we interpret this story? It makes a big difference what your viewpoint is and how you interpret the story. So Senator Obama's spokesperson at the time says, Clinton's Bosnia story joined a growing list of instances in which Senator Clinton has exaggerated her role in foreign and domestic policymaking. That's pretty much code for a lie, that she is not telling the truth, that she's embellishing the story to make herself look better. That is intentionality. That is the assumption of intentionality in this particular circumstance. Of course, Senator Clinton's response is not going to be terribly surprising. I went to 80 countries, I gave lots of contemporaneous accounts, I wrote a lot about this in my book, I say a lot of things, I say millions of words, so if I misspoke, it was just a misstatement. This is a reflection that is a false memory. It was not intentional, it wasn't a lie. I have this life of experience. So she flips this around on Senator Obama and her other competitors and says this is an outcome of all of my experience that I made this particular mistake. So this is really hard for the viewer because now the viewer has to be in the position of deciding accuracy of human memory. The presentation makes a difference. How the media presents the information, the pictures, the video, the story has an impact on that circumstance. And even CBS News at that time had an impact on the story because of the way they presented the story, the terms and the words and the language that they used. Passive consumerism has an impact here as well too, that if you are not listening and not thinking about the information you are being presented, and if you don't know something about how memory works, you are potentially at a disadvantage. Critical thinking can allow you to make slightly better decisions in a circumstance like this. So, to conclude, you can and you must be a responsible citizen. You must think critically. Unfortunately, critically thinking takes more time and more effort. You must be an active consumer. That also takes more time and more effort. Being a passive consumer collecting information without thought is trivially easy to do. And it is often the position that some people default to because they have other things to do and they don't have enough time to think critically. So media and memory do interact with each other. You have to pay attention to that fact. I'm just going to conclude with a couple of pictures of why do we care. We have to care. You've heard a lot about the Supreme Court in the last couple of weeks. The Supreme Court is one of the most important decisions that comes with the honor of being the President of the United States. And we already see with a Supreme Court member dying recently that it is chaos now in terms of decisions that are being made and how that is going to impact us in the future. The decision on who you choose to be president has a major impact in this one tiny little area of our existence. And on the right up there is the 6-year-old answer to this question, which is my own little girl. I often have to think about when I am making a decision, I'm not just making a decision for me. I'm making a decision for other people. I'm making a decision for my own child as well. And that emphasizes to me, I had better think carefully about what I am going to leave for my daughter as a future in this process. I just want to take a second as I finish up here to thank the organizers and the rest of the presenters of the talks. I will tell you, for 2 nights of rehearsals, it has been a great experience for me to listen to the presenters and hear over 3, 4, 5, 6 iterations of all the talks, how they've improved, and it's been just really wonderful for me to be part of that experience, and I appreciate the invitation to come tonight. Thank you, everybody.
All right, are there any questions?
You talk about this idea of being a responsible citizen, and so I'm curious what you think that we can do as students to be responsible citizens and to be responsible voters in this upcoming election.
I think my answer to that is to be active in the process. I don't necessarily mean active in terms of being a protester and going to the talks when Donald Trump comes tomorrow, or whatever day of the week it is. It doesn't require that level of activity. It requires awareness, and it requires reading, and it requires thought. I know many times when I pull up a CNN page or whatever it is that I'm reading, my temptation is to read the headline or to look at the picture. And that is a start because that is something active. But you almost never get the full picture by looking only at that piece of information. You have to be willing to overcome the temptation to only read a little, and you have to read a lot. And if you are of a particular political persuasion, and you know that already, there's always a temptation to read information only about that political persuasion. I would encourage people to read the other side as well too, as part of being an active citizen.
You talked a little bit about biases that can come up in media. So I know we have a couple of editors and writers here on the Red and Black staff, student newspaper. What would you give as a recommendation to people like us to avoid bias in our writing, or is that possible?
Clearly, when you are writing for a newspaper or a news organization, what you are writing is going to have a spin to it based on the writer's interests and their background and the point that they're trying to make. So a lot of this doesn't apply to an editorial page or a place where you're giving your opinion about a particular topic. But in a story that is more factual in nature, I think one of the things that often happens is that people who write stories don't necessarily always write the headlines to go with the stories. And the headlines are often the thing that people read. And the headline has to be representative of the information that's actually in the article. So I know that's a very focused, very tiny answer to your question, but I think that's one of the issues that comes up frequently, is that if we assume that people are being passive and that they're not going to read everything, the tiny bit that they are going to see has to be very carefully crafted as part of that process.
Hi, Dr. Klitz. I really enjoyed your presentation. So do you think that there should be like a class or just more opportunities for students to know about the voting process? Like, for example, I'm from DC and I can't vote here, but I don't know like where to go or who to talk to.
That's a really good question, and I'm not necessarily of the belief that everything that you would want or need to learn has to happen in a classroom setting. So I think there might be some opportunities outside of a classroom setting where there can be an educational process about voting. I know when I went to my undergraduate school, I had no idea what I was supposed to do in order to vote. It took me 2 years to figure out, oh, I'm not a resident here. I should be voting absentee back in Ohio and sending those ballots in. It took me too long to figure that out, and I didn't go find that information myself. So I'm not putting all the responsibility on you as students to figure that out yourself. I think there are lots of organizations out there that make an attempt to make that information available, but I don't know that that information always crosses the school border rather than being out sort of in the more public domain. So I think there are ways to do it. I'm not sure the class is the right way to do it.
You mentioned the concept of false memory and actual like blatant lies. How do we as consumers kind of sift through all the information and put it in the right category to make the best decision for ourselves?
The answer to that is partly good luck, because it's a hard task to do, and you're relying on what other people are presenting you, so it puts you at a real disadvantage. I hate to sort of keep harping on the same idea in my answers, but it requires work, it requires reading. If you are seeing a headline and you're saying, wow, that is really outrageous what that headline is saying, your choice is either to believe it, to not believe it, or try to figure out whether that is an accurate statement or not. Figuring that out takes more reading. It takes investigating other sources. And I know as a teacher here, and I know for you all as students who have lots of work to do and lots of commitments, that's really hard to do. But between now and election time, if you were going to vote in the election, you have to find time to do that work. You have to find time to do that reading and listening to multiple sources. And you are going to make that judgment yourself. You will determine whether each one of those people up there is telling a mistruth or whether they're just making a mistake. It always requires more research to find the answer to that question.
Dr. Klitz, you seem like an honest and competent fellow. Would you consider running for the candidacy?
That's a much better version of the question than rehearsal. So the answer to that question that I gave is hell no. I like what I'm doing here, and there is no way I would put myself in the position to do that job or take myself out of my life in order to be a candidate. I mean, think about what the candidates are doing right now. They probably have not been in their own home for 2 years, and we still have 6 months more to go. There is a right person to do that. There are lots of right people to do that, but it's not me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, can we give one last round of applause to those 5 amazing speakers? Additional thanks go out to Emily Payne, Sam Shaw, Maureen Valentine, Erin Jones, Dean Eva, Jordan Cosbell, KT Ice, all of the fellows that helped out, and Dr. Aaron Smith. Thank you.
Once again, thank you for your continued support. Please stay afterwards for additional intellectual conversation as well as reception located in the back of the ball.